Well, it's a simple idea with big potential, turning polluted air into actual products that most of us will use every day.
Absolutely. Here in a Southern California plastics factory, you are not going to imagine where this comes from. Just wait until you see this story.
We connected with New Light through our technology innovation funnel at Dell, who's doing, of all things, making plastic out of the carbon in the air. It almost seemed like it was too good to be true.
Wow, so the solution to global warming is here.
This building in Costa Mesa, California looks unremarkable. And what's happening inside sounds unreal.
So that's plastic that was literally made out of thin air. We would be breathing this right now.
A way of turning carbon in the air into plastic. And the great thing is, it's going to be cheaper than regular plastic. And it's been featured on USA Today, The Guardian, The Weather Channel, CBS, and of course, Fox News. And the computer company Dell is promoting this amazing new technology hard. So it can't be complete bullshit, right? I mean, surely someone must have fact-checked this, right? So firstly, they claim that they're going to be making this plastic out of exhaust gases.
That hopes to be a big game changer for climate change. And Dave, you were telling us earlier about how they take the carbon out of the atmosphere and turn it into plastic. How exactly do they do that? And Stephen, our producer, said, well, why don't they just hook up kind of a vacuum to, smokestacks and just get it right like that?
Well, that's great. So now we know what we're talking about. Carbon dioxide.
Yeah, that would be the way to do that, and they are doing that. In the future, they hope to get it from a concentrated source. Right now, they're taking it from the air, and they're taking it from concentrated sources, but everything you see here, the cups, the bag, the plates, even, in fact, the chair that I'm sitting on right now, it's all made from this plastic that comes from the air, and it's one man's dream.
And here's their CEO saying that just like trees take carbon dioxide out of the air,
pull Southern California's polluted air from the roof and make something with all that carbon coming from cars, power plants, and farms.
Plants do this every single day. The way a tree grows is by pulling carbon out of the air. Every single thing that you see that's green, that's all produced by pulling carbon out of the air. So we do precisely the same thing. It's all around us. We just found a way to pull it out of an airstream and then turn it into a plastic molecule. And that plastic molecule we can then turn into shapes and things like bags. The environmental impact has the potential to be massive.
Yeah, that's mostly right. Trees take carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and water and a load of energy from the sun and turn that into sugar, which is then polymerized to make things like cellulose, which is essentially wood. Now, plants get that energy from the sun. They are solar powered. Where is he going to get his energy from? Solar roadways? Thorium powered cars? Because the one place he can't get it from is burning fossil fuels, because that will dump about as much carbon dioxide into the atmosphere as he's going to be sequestering. Now, some rough chemical compositions. Most plastics are basically petroleum-based polymers, and their chemical composition is basically that of oil, which is approximately this. Sugars and their polymers such as cellulose make up things like wood and can, at a simple chemical composition level, be looked at as partially combusted hydrocarbon. That is, if you could simply transform these petroleum-based polymers into wood, it would release a load of energy. And then, of course, you can simply finish off that oxidation in a very simple manner just by burning the wood, which everyone knows releases a load of heat. I mean, it's basically turning wood into carbon dioxide, water, and a load of energy, effectively reversing what photosynthesis did in the first place. But energy is conserved here. There are no free lunches. If you want to turn that carbon dioxide back into wood, you've got to put a load of energy in from somewhere, and it will cost you at least as much energy as you got out from burning it in the first place. And the same thing is true if you're trying to turn carbon dioxide into hydrocarbon-based plastics. Where is this energy going to come from? Secondly, of course, this would just be a drop in the ocean. From my last video, you'll recall that humans breathe out about 1 kilogram of carbon dioxide per day. That's just your carbon footprint for being alive. And then you have all these people from CBS just gasping with awe at how someone has maybe sequestered 50 or so grams of carbon in a cell phone cover.
So I know this sounds more like magic than science, so I wanted to make sure you guys could actually touch and feel this. So you each get a cell phone case. That's for Nora.
Charlie
That's for Charlie. I got them in Charlie's favorite color.
That's right.
And it's very hard to read, but on there it says pulled from the air for Nora O'Donnell, Charlie Rose, Gail King.
Oh, I
so
see. Yeah.
that carbon would otherwise be up in the air heating the atmosphere.
I mean, seriously, that's only about 1/20th of their personal daily metabolic carbon footprint, and they're impressed by it.
Newlight is selling its plastic to companies such as furniture maker KI, which uses it to create chairs. There are also air carbon cell phone cases, soap dishes, and even plastic bags.
That hopes to be a big game changer for climate change. And Dave, you were telling us earlier about how they take the carbon out of the atmosphere and turn it into plastic.
Plastic bag. There you go.
Regular plastic bag.
At a recent Fortune magazine event, Michael Dell announced he will use Newlight's air carbon bags to wrap his Dell computers.
We're going to be shipping that with our Latitude notebooks.
And just their personal metabolic carbon footprint is peanuts compared to their total carbon footprint. I mean, like I said, this is a drop in the ocean at best. I mean, let's keep this in perspective.
In 2011, the U.S. alone generated almost 14 million tons of plastic. Only about 8% was ever recycled.
14 million tons might sound like a lot, until you realize that the U.S. carbon footprint is about 5,000 million tons, which was achieved by burning about 2,000 million tons of oil. Yeah, all of the plastics that you consume are, give or take, only about 1% of your entire carbon footprint. If we were talking about carbon dioxide, he's simply talking crap. But it turns out that all that speak about basically doing what trees do, not entirely honest. Turns out that this process is actually going to run on methane. That's right, it's basically turning hydrocarbon into plastic, which sounds exactly like what the oil industry is currently doing. So what's the difference? Well, they claim that they're going to get the methane out of the air.
We connected with Newlight through our technology innovation funnel at Dell, who's doing, of all things, making plastic out of the carbon in the air. It almost seemed like it was too good to be true.
And I simply call bullshit on that. Well, you've got to understand that there really isn't much methane in air, and for good reason. It gets oxidized away in our atmosphere really quite quickly, with a half-life of about 10 years. Now, while it's true methane is a very big greenhouse gas, it's also true that its concentration in air is very low, only about 1 part per million. There is just bugger all methane in the air. So, I mean, just some ballpark numbers. A cubic meter of air, that's what this girl is essentially sitting in, weighs about 1 kilogram. So if you wanted to make about 1 kilogram of plastic, you would need to harvest the methane of 1 million cubic meters of air with 100% efficiency. I mean, look, this is the tube they claim they're sucking all their air through to make this plastic.
Pull Southern California's polluted air from the roof and make something with all that carbon. This plastic comes from the air.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I can feel it.
So the air's going through here.
And this is it right here. More than 50% of this plastic right here came from the air on top of this building.
So let's do a real simple back-of-the-envelope calculation. For a trivial task of, say, producing 1 kilogram of plastic per hour, that means they've got to suck 1 million cubic meters of air through that tube. That tube, if you're generous, is about 0.1 meters by 0.1 meters. So if they're going to achieve the paltry task of making only 1 kilogram of plastic per hour, it turns out they'd have to be sucking air through that tube at about 100 times the speed of sound. And that's just a flow problem. Unless they've got some magic method for extracting the methane out of the air, it's simply pointless. Now, 100 times the speed of sound, about 100 times the speed of a bullet, might not sound impossible to some people. So let me put this into more human dimensions. So we basically need about 1 million cubic meters of air to create a single kilogram of plastic. Well, by a happy coincidence, the volume of the Empire State Building is also about 1 million cubic meters. So the bare minimum you would have to do is pump a volume of air the size of the Empire State Building, ignoring all the stuff about extracting the methane and turning it into plastic. But just for the moment, let's just take a look at the costs of pumping that sort of volume of air. So I'm just going to take a sort of industrial pump that can pump about 2 cubic meters per second, and it runs on about 2 kilowatts. So this pump would take about 1 week to pump that million cubic meters of air. And just the grid electricity to pump that volume of air would generate about 200 kilograms of carbon dioxide, the equivalent of burning about 100 kilograms of oil to generate 1 kilogram of plastic. And just to put that into some perspective, the petrochemical industry basically works by taking about 1 kilogram of oil and turning it into about 1 kilogram of plastic.
Gone from do less harm to do no harm to let's make it better than we left it. New Light Technologies is such a great partner for that because they're making it better.
I mean, this really is the problem that you face, that you have essentially 1,000 tons of air and you're trying to extract from that 1 kilogram of methane, which can maybe be converted into about a kilogram of plastic. Look, this is the thing. You can get methane from the petrochemical industry fairly cheaply. But these air carbon people claim that their process is cheaper than the petrochemical industry.
Although Mark truly believes he has found a way to make air plastic cost less than oil plastic.
In which case, the obvious question, if your air methane is cheaper than petrochemical industry methane, why not just sell it as fuel? You know, just for burning. It would be incredibly biofriendly, as methane's about 30 times as bad a greenhouse gas as carbon dioxide. I mean, there's just something about this that really stinks. That is, I simply don't believe that there would ever be a cost-effective way of extracting methane from the atmosphere like this. Now, if you were doing this with biosources of methane, well, now that's a little different. But that's much more what the petrochemical industry is essentially doing at the moment. And calling it air carbon, you know, pulled out of the air.
Right, so this is actually air carbon.
Air carbon is the product name they use for this white powder.
How does this become plastic, though?
Heat it up and air carbon becomes a plastic called PHA.
So that's plastic that was literally made out of thin air.
We would be breathing this right now.
Seems to be entirely misleading. So, in summary, if they're talking about making plastic from the carbon dioxide in the air, then they're simply talking crap, as it could never be cost effective unless you can find a cheaper source of energy than fossil fuels. If he's talking about methane in the air, then he's more full of crap than the Empire State Building is full of air. And if he's talking about biomethane created on a farm in a biological reactor, you know, to generate the methane in the first place, he's talking about biomethane generated on a farm. And he's not talking about pulling it out of the air. And all those claims about pulling carbon out of the air, not really true.
Almost all plastics today come from fossil fuels. So the difference with air carbon is made from air and carbon that we would otherwise be breathing right now.
Look, there's one polymer that has the undisputed claim to call itself air carbon. It's the most abundant biomolecule on Earth, cellulose, created by plants and the key structural component of trees. You know, wood. You want to use air carbon to wrap your computers, use paper. Then at least the carbon genuinely came from the atmosphere, not some fraudulent claims about being able to make plastic cost effective out of thin air. But I still just wail with despair at just how much scientific illiteracy there is throughout the mainstream media.
So I know this sounds more like magic than science, so I wanted to make sure you guys could actually touch and feel this. So you each get a cell phone case.
And just how a large company like Dell can promote this pseudoscience without even a cursory look as to if those claims are even remotely possible.
We connected with Newlight through our technology innovation funnel at Dell, who's doing, of all things, making plastic out of the carbon in the air. That almost seemed like it was too good to be true.